This is George Whitten, founder and editor of Worthy News. The title of this episode is the Simchat Torah War Part 2. It is Sunday, October 15th, 2023. The war has been going on about a week now, and I want to get into the spiritual application of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Lebanon, how this war will expand, but specifically how we as believers are called to pray, what we should be praying for, and what we should be anticipating prophetically. So let's get right to it. We're going to go right into our word. Now, the first thing I want to explain is that we're now in the middle of a test. You know, the Lord says, the Lord tests the righteous. Nothing changes. If the Lord tested the children of Israel, if the Lord tested the Lord, Yeshua was tested in the wilderness for 40 days. Do you not think that you're in a test? Of course we're in a test. And so it talks about the Lord testing the righteous. We have to just understand it's an open book test. We should be able to pass this test. It's an open book test. But then notice this, in this passage it says, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. This word violence is actually the Hebrew word Hamas. Yes, the same sounding word for Hamas today is an ancient Hebrew word, Hamas, and literally means violence. It was used in talking about when God destroyed the world in Noah's day because the world was filled with violence. It was filled with Hamas. So that's the first thing I want to kind of go is that we're in a test. So how do we pass the test that we're in? God has given us His word, and we have to understand that part of the is that we're in a test, and people don't realize we're in a test first, and second, they're not reading the word. I mean, we have a day coming when it says I'm going to send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor thirst of water, but the hearing of the words of the Lord. And they shall wander from sea to sea and from north to east. They shall run to and fro, seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. You got to know this word. Secondly, it says this in Jeremiah 23. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because this is specifically an end times prophecy. I want you to read with me. For who among them has stood in the counsel of the Lord to see and to hear His word? Who has paid attention to His word and listened? That's the question that God is asking. Who has stood here, read His word, paid attention to it, listened? Next, behold, the storm of the world, the storm of the Lord, wrath has gone forth, a whirling tempest, or like a tornado. It will burst upon the head of the wicked. The anger of the Lord will not turn back until He's executed and accomplished the intents of His heart. In the latter days, you will understand that clearly. In the latter days, in the end of days. This phrase is Akrit Hayamin. We're going to talk about this phrase a lot in this particular video. But Akrit Hayamin, you'll understand this perfectly. Are you paying attention to His word? Are you listening? Are you trembling at His word? This is what it talks about, talking about the last days. I'm talking about Isaiah. It says that the heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What is the house that you would build for me? And what is the place of my rest? And then He says, all these things my hands have made. So all these things came to be, declares the Lord. Who is God looking at? He's looking at the one who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at His word. That know the word, that are just broken by the word. That's why it's called a two-edged sword. It discerns the intents of the heart. It's trying to discern us. There is a spiritual war going on. And the spiritual war is taking place, and we are looking at, and most people are looking at this war physically, and I don't want to be another rehasher of what's happening on the ground. There's enough videos out there. I want to talk about what's happening spiritually. And the root of all this is the spirit that is holding Iran prisoner, holding the kingdom of Persia prisoner. Look at this. Daniel is praying in Daniel 10, and he's praying and he's trying to get his prayer answered. And he said, hey, the angel came to him and says, oh, Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. So here was Daniel. And notice this, and it says, fear not, Daniel, from the first day you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before God, your words were heard. So he prayed. His prayer was actually heard the first day. But notice this, and I've come because of your words, but the kingdom of the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now this is an angel talking to Daniel. This is not talking about a man. This is not talking about a prince. This is talking about a principality. And what is Persia? Persia is modern day Iran. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes. So Michael, we're going to follow this progression of thought. Michael is the archangel that's very active in the last days, and I'll get into what he's getting ready to do and all the things that are connected to that. He came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. So there was principalities of Persia. And it helped you understand what is to happen to your people in the what? In the Akhirit Hayimim, in the end of days. This spiritual war was given to us to give us insight into the spiritual war that's happening in the heavenlies right now. Everything that's happening with Hamas, everything that's happening with Hezbollah, its root is with Iran. And all of these entities, its root is Islam. Now, continue on. One thing we have to understand that the spiritual entity that's over Islam right now is actually trying to rob a promise that was given to Abraham. I know this is something a little different, but you have to understand that when God came to Abraham, he said, look, your wife Sarah is going to have a son. And you're going to have a son. And he said, look, I'm 100 years old. Sarah's 90. Listen, I have this son. His name is Ishmael. And it says, that Ishmael might live before you. And then it says, no, look. No. God says, no, let me explain. Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son. You shall call his name Isaac or Yitzhak. I will make and establish a covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. So this is the promise connected to the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a continuation through the Gospels, a continuation into the seed of the Messiah, birthed through the lineage of Abraham. But notice here, while that's an everlasting covenant, there's a promise that's given to Ishmael. Notice this. As for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful, multiplying greatly, and he shall be a father of 12 princes. I will make him into a great nation. So there's a promise given to the sons of Ishmael. And what the demonic entity that is right now controlling the sons of Ishmael is literally trying to rob, kill, and destroy them, is using God's word against them. Because God told Abraham, I will bless them to bless thee, and will curse them to curse thee. And in Islam, you're to curse the sons of Abraham. You're to curse the Christians. You're to curse the Jews. And what it's actually doing by cursing the Christians and cursing the Jews is actually bringing a curse upon themselves. And so why? Why would? Because Satan doesn't care about the sons of Ishmael. He doesn't care he's trying to rob, kill, and destroy them. So we have to make sure we understand this. The next thing is that we're in the middle of these wars, and we're hearing wars, and the Lord said, look, don't be alarmed. Do not be alarmed. There's going to be nation against nation. There's going to be kingdom against kingdom. There's going to be earthquakes and famines and all these things. And these are just the beginning of their birth pangs. These are the beginning of the birth pangs. And notice this, that the reality is that so much hatred is coming our way as believers. You'll be hated for all nations, by all nations, for my name's sake. So there's going to be a hatred coming toward us as believers. And then, right, many shall fall away. Why? Because they don't understand they're in a test. And in this test, we're going to be betrayed. They're going to betray one another. They're going to hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will increase, the love of many will grow cold. Look, we're seeing the lawlessness now. We're seeing, people aren't being arrested for doing anything wrong. And people that are doing the right things are being arrested. It's like everything's backwards. We're in a twilight zone, it seems. But this is the reality. But I want you to focus on something. But this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed through the whole world as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. This will be a testimony to all nations. Now, I want you to really understand this, that the whole point of prophecy was to present this gospel message. It was never meant to try to figure out what day he's coming back. Quite frankly, anytime you spend on trying to figure out what day he's coming back, you're wasting your time, because he said you weren't going to know the day or the hour. He said he was coming in at a time you weren't expecting. So try not to think about that. Focus on the job at hand, and the job at hand is being a testimony of the gospel to all the nations, right? Continue on. And this is a passage in the early church fathers. This is in the Didache. And the reason why I bring this up is because I want you to look at what they wrote in the first century. For in the last days, the false prophets and corrupters shall be multiplied, and the sheep shall be turned into wolves, and love shall be turned into hate. Don't let your love be turned into hate. And don't become a wolf. We're sheep. We're sheep. I mean, so we have to understand that God has got a plan, and his redemption plan is to redeem people from every tribe and language and people and nation. That he's going forth, and he's got a plan, and he wants you to be part of this plan. Now, right now in the Gaza Strip, this is a very small area. It's about, it's extremely small, and there's 2.3 million people that live here. 2.3 million people that live here. And right now, there is a corridor being established by Israel to allow people in the north part of Gaza, where you see Gaza north, to flee south. They now are opening up the corridor, and yesterday there was a bomb that went off on the corridor that Hamas tried to blame Israel for. It was actually a bomb, and they said Israel is bombing people as they're fleeing. They're setting up barricades to not let people flee. And the reality is we're getting ready to see a ground operation in Gaza. And some people say, no, you need to end the war now. Look, you've already pummeled them. Listen, my hope is that this opens up the door to the gospel to the sons of Ishmael. Now, I want you to understand something. There are no evangelical churches in Gaza. Now, I love Wikipedia because they're so factually wrong so much of the time. If you read the first statement here, it says the Gaza Baptist Church was a Baptist church in Gaza City, Gaza, in the state of Palestine. There is no state of Palestine. The first sentence is completely wrong, right? But notice in paragraph 2, the Gaza Baptist Church was one of only 3 Christian churches of the Gaza Strip. The only one that was Protestant and evangelical. The other 2 remaining churches in the Gaza Strip are the Catholic Church and a Greek Orthodox Church. Here we are, the only evangelical church. There's only 3 churches. We have a situation that the Gaza Strip, is being bombed, and so now there's only one church, and the few Christians that are there are going, and they're fleeing into the Catholic Church. And you have to understand that there's so much anti-Semitism, even amongst believers, that in the beginning of the war, there was supposedly a medieval church in Gaza that was destroyed by Israel. And so a lot of Christians with the anti-Semitic spirit. And I have to tell you honestly, if you say you love Jesus, who's a Jew, how can you hate the Jewish people? It's an oxymoron. Anyway, that's another story, but I don't want to get sidetracked. So here we are. Here is a church that was claimed to be bombed. It was actually never bombed. It's fake news. The next thing is that this particular article, which is interesting, this was on October 12th, 2023, 3 days ago. The future looks dark for Christians in besieged Gaza. The subtitle, their presence in the Hamas-ruled Palestine enclave steadily weakened these past 20 years. The small Christian community in the Gaza Strip is praying for a swift end to the conflict. Wrong. You're praying that Hamas is completely uprooted. You're praying that the terrorist organization is uprooted, that Israel has to establish a government, and this government is open for Christian NGOs to go in to re-educate, because you have generation after generation after generation that has been taught that, that Islam is going to destroy Israel. They've been taught to hate the Jewish people, been taught to hate them so much that I believe that God is using the Jewish people to shame them, to prove that Allah is a false God, so that the sons of Ishmael can come back to their proper place in the kingdom. Okay? So now the next thing is this. Oh, I should bring this up. Whenever Israel withdrew out of Gaza in 2006, it actually opened up the door for Hamas to take over and became Hamasistan. So when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, the gospel was completely shut down for 20 years. 20 years. We need to be praying that the Lord sends harvesters into the field. The next thing is this. I'm bringing up this aspect because the war is going to spread out from Gaza. It's going to go into Lebanon. And the reason why it's going to go into Lebanon is that most people do not realize there was actually an Islamic prophecy that was given in July of this year that Muslims believed that this was the end of Israel. So right now, I think we're getting ready to see them trying to fulfill prophecy. But the God of Israel reigns. And this is a picture of the former security zone that Israel had actually occupied. There was a huge section that Israel occupied in Lebanon all the way to the year 2000. Now, in this security zone, when they left, just like in Gaza, when Israel left Gaza, that was taken up by Hamas. Now, immediately, this is a demographic of Lebanon. I believe it's a demographic of 2020. You see the purple area on the south? That was a former security zone of Israel, now completely taken over by Shiite Islam. That is the organization that is running up Hezbollah. I personally believe prophetically that this war is a war specifically against Shiite Islam to prove that that version of Islam is false. And then later there's another war against Sunni Islam that will prove that Sunni Islam is false. And then there's, we'll get into the wars. I don't want to jump the gun here, but let's talk about these things. So in Lebanon, it used to be a thriving Christian community. It used to be the majority of Lebanon. And because Hezbollah took such a struggle and a stranglehold, it actually forced a lot of Lebanese Christians to flee Lebanon. Let's pray that Israel goes ahead, takes occupation, and allows the Lebanese Christian community to reoccupy those areas that have been so occupied by Shiite Islam, specifically by Hezbollah. So the next thing is that this war will probably extend into Syria. The main reason being is that there's enough assets on the Damascus border area, that's southern Israel, and it's also being used as a corridor for weapons to be brought into the region. We just had a bombing at Aleppo, which is the far north. And when the bomb took place, I do not believe that Israel is going to allow the international airports to open up because Iran continues to funnel in weapons. So now we have to anticipate that Syria may get involved. Now, some people have asked me if I thought this was the destruction of Damascus. I do not. I'll get into that why. But I want you to really grab hold of a spirit. We have to understand that our goal should not be that these people are destroyed, but our goal is that they have access to the gospel. Now, they don't agree with us. They disagree with us. They actually hate Christians. But, here was a situation where James and John were going through Samaria, and they weren't received. And he was going to go pass through, and they weren't received. And so they asked Jesus, they asked Yeshua, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just as Elijah did? And Jesus turned and rebuked them, and said, you do not know what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's life, but to save them. So we have to understand that the hope of the Lord is not to wipe them out. The hope of the Lord is not to destroy anyone. The hope of the Lord is not to kill anyone. That is the job, or what the task is of the devil. He's come to rob, kill, and destroy. We're the opposite of that. We're praying in life. We're praying that God deals with the wicked, that God will deal with the terrorist, but we're also praying that a door is opened, to those areas. And we ought to be praying right now that God sends laborers into the harvest field, that God is already preparing the hearts of people, as lambs going in the midst of wolves, that God is preparing people to go in to be missionaries into Gaza, missionaries into Lebanon, missionaries into Syria, missionaries into Iran. I believe that what we're getting ready to anticipate and what we're getting ready to see is the end of Shiite Islam. I'll get into why I believe that in a little bit. People have asked me if I thought this was the destruction of Damascus. I do not. Connected with the destruction of Damascus is the day that Jacob's glory will fade. and it will be as when the harvester gathers the standing grain and reaches the heads of the harvest. And it literally talks about there will be gleanings left. If this is the case, then we're looking at a very severe judgment coming to Israel. I do not see that coming yet. I see this as more as the opportunity of these areas that I was talking about before coming to salvation. I want to focus on this particular passage because this is I believe this is the war that precedes the Gog-Magog War. I believe that this is the anticipation of what many people are calling World War III. I do believe this is a significant major war. I believe that with all my heart. I believe we're dealing with specifically Shiite Islam. And in this particular passage, it talks about at the time of the end, the king of the south. And this word south is Negev. We pretty much know it's Egypt based on the passage. The king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, with many ships, and he shall come into the country, shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land. That's talking about Israel. And tens of thousands shall fall. So it literally talks about a lot of people dying. But these shall be delivered out of his hands: Edom, Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. Now I want you to focus on those things, because Edom, Moab, and Ammon escape out of his hands. Now I'm going to show you a map of this in a second, but this is directly connected to the wilderness wanderings of Moses. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become the ruler of treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. Now, right now, that's not happening. Egypt hasn't found the treasures of gold and silver, hasn't found the precious things of Egypt. Next, the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow at his train. So the Libyans and the Cushites are Ethiopia. And if you understand that Libya and Ethiopia are the borders of the Gog-Magog War, this is the southern border of this particular war. But news from the east, so this is the east of the glorious land. So where are we talking about? We're talking about Jordan. We're talking about Iraq. We're talking about Saudi Arabia. Notice this: news from the east and the north shall alarm him. So the north, we're talking about Syria. We're talking about Lebanon. Shall alarm him, and he will go forth with a great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. So he talks about a mass amount of people dying. I believe this is the war that Antichrist comes to power, because this is connected to setting up the palladial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. And I'll get into chapter 12 in a little bit. But this is directly talking about the time of the end. It's directly talking about a war in the Middle East. And it's talking about a war where news out of the east and the north shall alarm, and will go great fury to annihilate. In some translations, it literally use the word annihilation. I believe that Islam is being set up. And I know many people believe that the Antichrist has come from Islam. As someone that lives in Israel, no Jew is going to follow an Antichrist who's Muslim. I'm sorry, that's just not the way it is. What I do see is a battle of a Masonic leader, a Masonic, M-A-S-O-N, not Messianic, Masonic leader, is waging war against an Islamic leader, or leaders, depending on how you view this passage, but a war that is taking place in which the countries of Islam are actually decimated. Now, I want to show you something. In the passage previous, I talked about they shall have the treasures of gold and silver. I suggest you watching this video called Raiders of the Lost Ark, Solomon's Lost Treasure in the Ethiopian Dam. I did this video about 2 or 3 years ago. It will help explain why I believe Egypt's getting ready to walk into a treasure trove. It's actually walking into Solomon's treasure trove. I explain that in the video. I don't have time to get into it, but I want to get back to this passage here when it talks about Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Edom, Moab, and Ammon is very key. This is a map of the ancient kingdoms of Edom. You'll see the ancient kingdom of Edom is south. It includes part of Petra. It includes Moab, which is the east part of the Dead Sea, and Ammon is up where the Jewish people cross into Jericho. You'll see right across the opposite side of the Jordan River, Jericho. So that right there is the wilderness wanderings of Moses. I'll show you a map in a little bit, but I want to jump to a passage because God is preparing something. This is talking about the great war in heaven, and it's talking about what God is going to do with the Jewish people in the end of days. It says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon on her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She's pregnant, crying out in birth pangs, giving agony in birth. And there was a dragon that was there. And the dragon talks about the third of the stars of heaven, and many believe this is talking about a third of the angels that fell at the beginning, and they hurled him to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that whatever she gave birth, he might devour her child. And when she gave birth to a son, a male child who's to rule all the nations with an iron rod. So we know that that's a picture of Yeshua. And her child will snatch away to God and to his throne. So this is who the Lord is. But notice this here. Then the woman fled into the wilderness. Notice this. Into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God so that she might take care of her for 1260 days. Listen, if you really want to understand Revelation, you have to understand Genesis and Exodus, because it's playing itself out again. This wilderness wandering, I believe, is directly connected to the passage we just read. Edom, Moab, and Ammon escaped out of his hands. This is the wilderness wanderings of Moses. And you'll see, and the reason why I use this particular map is there's two versions of the wanderings. But for the majority of the time, they were in Edom, Moab, and Ammon. That's where they were. That was the wilderness wanderings of Moses. And you'll see that that's directly correlated in correlation to the same three areas that God said was taken out of the hands, that the person that was waging war against the countries of the east, overcome the countries of the north, they could not touch Edom, Moab, and Ammon. They could not touch this area. Why? God prepared a place for them. I don't have time to get into a lot of the Talmudic understandings and a lot of the understandings of the rabbis, but in a nutshell, I believe the children of Israel are going back to the wilderness to find God so they can come back into the land. Just like they had to go to the wilderness wanderings for 40 years, they had to go through their test. There's another test. And I wish I could get into it. I just don't have time to get into it. But I'm going to go back to this passage of giving birth because we're going back to Isaiah 66. And you really should study this out carefully because it talks about the birthing. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before pain came, she delivered a male child. So now, who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Can a land be born at once? Can a nation be born forth at once? So here is talking about the male child being birthed before pain came. Okay, so here we are, the birthing of the king. But now notice this. For as soon as Sion, this is a picture of Jerusalem. For as soon as Sion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. Will I bring the moment of birth and not give delivery, says Adonai? Will I who caused the delivery shut up the womb, says your Lord your God? And then it says, rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her, all you who love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all you who mourn over her. And so here's a picture, a connection to the Jewish people, and a connection specifically to Jerusalem. And remember what the Lord says. He says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I wish I could gather you under my wings, but you would not." And it said this, you shall not see me again until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And so this is why we're praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And when we're praying for the peace of Jerusalem, we're really, in essence, praying for the salvation of Israel. Now, continuing on is a war. I'm going back to the Revelation 12 passage, because there's a war that broke out in heaven, Michael and his angels against the dragon, and they were thrown down to the earth. And notice here, who were the people that were able to overcome? They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. So the overcomers were those that had actually given themselves up to the gospel's sake. This is the key. And we have to understand, we got to know this word. We continue on in this passage, and we realize that Daniel 11 was talking about the king of the north, the king of the south, and it concluded with setting up the Palladial tents in between in the glorious Holy Land. And then it says this, at the time Michael shall rise. Now, this is directly connected to the archangel that was fighting against kings of Persia and in the Daniel 10 passage we just read. This is directly connected to the passage we just read in Revelation 12, talking about a great battle in heaven, and Michael cast out Satan, right? And now we're seeing this place here. There is a rise of Michael, the great prince, who was charged of the people. So Michael is the one is in charge of watching over the Jewish people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as there never been since a nation till that time. Why do we know that? Because Satan has been cast out of heaven. He's waging war. But at that time your people shall be delivered. I love that idea. You're being delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep to the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting contempt. Now notice this, the recurring theme of this prophecy. Notice this, ready? It's always about the gospel. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Here we are again. What's our goal? What's the job of understanding prophecy? It's to understand that we're supposed to be activated to spread this good news of the gospel. But you, Daniel, shut the words and seal the book. So even now, I believe the prophecy is still sealed. I don't think that we fully understand everything happening. Even now, the war taking place in Gaza, and the war taking place in Lebanon, the war taking place that will soon take place in Iran and Syria. We're not supposed to know all these things yet. It's still sealed. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. And many shall run to and fro. Notice this again. Many shall run to and fro. Why are they running to and fro? Because they're seeking the famine of the word of God. Remember what it said in Amos that we read earlier. They shall go to and fro, seeking the word of the Lord, and shall not find it, because there's a famine of the word, and knowledge shall increase. We're seeing the exponentiality of the knowledge. But right now, what we're seeing is so much knowledge, so much information in a pile of things that the truth is one page now, hidden in this information age. Stay focused on the truth. Don't go here and there. Don't go to and fro. Stay focused on the truth, because God's got a plan for you. You continue reading this. Now, a lot of people say that this is the Gog-Magog War. I personally do not believe this. I try not to be dogmatic about prophecy, and we really should never be dogmatic about anything. We really should be humble and just realize, the word is the word, and we just want to expound on what the word says. In my humble opinion, my personal opinion, I believe the Gog-Magog War actually tells you two different wars in the same war. And I think the key to understanding this particular war is understanding two phrases. In Ezekiel 38:8, talking about a time when Israel's at perfect peace, living secure without walls or gates, it talks about the phraseology is in the latter years. The word latter years is literally in Hebrew, Acharit Shanim. Now, Acharit Shanim literally means in the end of years. I believe that this portion of Scripture and this portion of the Gog-Magog War, when they're talking about perfect peace, is connected to the millennial kingdom. When it talks about at the end of 1,000 years, and you can read this in Revelation 20, I don't have the slide with me, but Revelation 20, after Satan was released after 1,000 years, that he gathers up the nations to deceive them, and there's Gog and Magog will come against the saints. Okay, that's what I believe, that the one portion of this passage is connected to that war. However, the second portion of the passage, I believe, is connected to us in our day. Now, it's not connected to us today. It's talking about a war in the future. I believe this is the war at the end of the tribulation. I will show you the documentation of why I believe that. First off, you will come against the people, right? Like the cloud covering the land. In the latter days, I will come against the land, right? So in the latter days, okay? So in the end of days, that's the same phrase, Akrit Hayamim. O Gog, I will vindicate my holiness before their eyes, so that the nations may know me. Notice this, that the nations may know me. This can't be now. The reason for this war is to show who God is. Continue on this passage. I want you to understand that the Gog-Magog War, the borders of the Gog-Magog War, there are certain nations not mentioned. For example, you do not see Syria. You do not see Iraq, or in the Bible you see the word Shinar, or you know, something to do with Babylon. You do not see Jordan or Moab, right? You do not see Ammon. You do not see Edom. You do not see Egypt. There are nations that should be mentioned in the Gog-Magog War that are not there. I believe this is connected directly to the Daniel 11 war. The Daniel 11 war talks about him fighting as the king of the south, specifically Egypt. Talks about him fighting against all the countries of the east and destroying the country of the north. I believe this is the wiping out of Islam in its entirety. Now, continue on. This would be how children of Israel and how people would be deceived in believing that this guy who waged war against Islam, right, he was able to make war against the beasts. There's a quarter of mankind dying by sword, by war, by disease, by pestilence, by a lot of different things. But the same borders of the Gog-Magog War are the exact same borders of the land that was promised to Abraham. Now here the Antichrist will say, I have taken control of the land of Abraham, the promises of Abraham. And many will believe that this is the Messiah. However, he does not allow Edom, Moab, and Ammon to be given in his hands, so that the promise, Abraham's promise, cannot be fulfilled through the Antichrist. The Antichrist will not be able to complete this promise. He will not be able to prove his who he is. It's in this area, it's another story, but notice this, in the Ezekiel war, it says, look, son of man, speak to all the birds of the air. And it talks about this great feast, this great sacrificial feast that I'm preparing on the mountains of Israel. Now notice that the war is happening in Israel. You shall eat flesh and drink blood. You shall eat the flesh of the mighty. You shall drink the blood of the princes of the earth. Right? This is the great sacrificial feast that I am preparing for you. Where? On the mountains of Israel. This is the end of the Gog-Magog War. Now, what is this directly connected to? Directly connected to Revelation 19. And I cried with a loud voice to all the heirs, come gather together for the great supper of God. To eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and the riders, the flesh of all men. Now, when is this happening? I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against who? Against him who was sitting on the horse and his army. So this is the end of the trib. This is the Lord's return. That's Gog-Magog. Continue on. What happens at the end of the Gog-Magog War? And the house of Israel shall know that I am their Lord, their God. This is the redemption of Israel. And from that day forward, ready, notice this, and the nations shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity, because they dealt so treacherously with me, that I hid my face from them, and gave them into the hand of the adversaries, and they fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to the uncleanness and their transgressions. I hid my face from them. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, I will restore the fortunes of Jacob, and have mercy on the whole house of Israel, for I am jealous of my holy name. They shall forget their shame, and all the treachery they have practiced against me, when they dwell secure in their land, with none to make them afraid. When I have brought them back from the peoples, and gathered them from their enemies' lands, and through them have vindicated my holiness in the sight of many nations. Then they shall know that I am the Lord their God, because I sent them into exile among the nations, and they assembled them into their own land. I will leave none of them remaining among the nations any more. I will not hide my face any more from them. When what? When I pour out my spirit upon the house of Israel, declares the Lord your God. Listen, this is talking about the redemption of Israel. It's talking about when the Spirit of God is poured out upon Israel. When is this happening? It happens at the end of a great feast. When is the great feast connected to? It's connected to the Lord's return. So this is talking about, this is how all the nations shall know who God is, because he's keeping his promise to Israel. And I want you to understand this so carefully, because if God breaks his promise to Israel, then he breaks his promises with us. When the writer of Romans is writing this out, when Paul is writing this out, he says, who should separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulations, and he goes through all these different things. And his proof is, in Romans 9, 10, and 11, his proof text is that God still loves the Jewish people. And if God is promising us something, he's using Israel today to prove to us that his word is true. And if his word is true, that means everything else is true. So, there's this whole this linking up that God is setting up. I want to continue on because we realize that a remnant of Israel is going to be saved. But notice this, for Adonai will carry out his word upon the earth, bringing it to an end and finishing quickly. That all these things are getting ready to take place. That it's getting ready to take place, and it's going to happen quickly. And it's connected to the redemption of Israel. It's connected to the remnant of Israel. We're now living in the times of the harvest of the world. There's more people going to be saved in our generation than any other generation. Why? It's not that there's a greater remnant. It's just that the remnant is so huge in our day. It's 8 billion people. That God has brought you to this point to understand the wars and rumors of wars and all these things was not to send you into fear. And it was not to get you so full of hate. It was actually to fulfill your calling. Because look, he says to you, look, arise and shine. For your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. That is what's taking place across the entire world. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will be seen upon you. And nations shall come to who? To your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. That you should be this light. Now notice this here, and I love this, because this is also a promise. Hamas shall no more be heard in your land, devastation or destruction within your borders. For you shall call your walls Yeshua, and your gates praise. Praise the Lord. Listen, I know that covered a lot today, but I do believe that the Simchat Torah war is actually preparing the harvest of harvests. That this war is being used by God for the end of Shiite Islam, so that the Sunni nations can come together and gather together without a division in Islam. But in this period, where Shiite Islam is proven to be false, it will open up a door for us, for the gospel. So you should not be praying for the end of this war quickly. You should be praying that it's quick and expedient. It's the end of Hamas and the end of Hezbollah. Why? Because the spirits that control Hamas and Hezbollah are also controlling the fate and the salvation of those in Gaza, those in Lebanon, and those in Iran. May the Lord send in laborers into the harvest field. May we see things happen like we've never seen. May we arise to who we are. We're kings and priests of the Most High God. That we're called to understand the things that are happening so that we can be activated. It's not about how much we know. It's who we know. And it's not about how much we read in a day. It's how much we learn in a day. It's really learning who he is, what he wants you to do, and what you're called to do. So look, this is George Whitten. I'm sorry it took so long in this episode. Normally I'm not so long, but I had a lot to cover. Sign up for our Worthy Briefs if you don't get them. And, check out our other videos on worthy.tv. I'm not going to post anything that is being repeated by others. I'm going to give you what the Lord is speaking to me about and what the Lord is really telling me. And I try not to listen to a whole lot of people because I really want to hear from God. So thank you for listening. Please share and please let others know about this channel. Thanks. Until next time, this is George Whitten reporting with Worthy News.